no doubt that when you start seeing chemical weapons used on a large scale, and again, we're still gathering information about this particular event, but it is very troublesome. What we've seen indicates that this is clearly a big event of grave concern.
The red line comment that you made was about a year ago this week.
Right.
We know since then there have been things that should qualify for crossing that red line.
Well, Chris, I've got to say this: when we take action, let's just take the example of Syria. There are rules of international law, and if the U.S. goes in and attacks another country without a UN mandate and without clear evidence that can be presented, then there are questions in terms of whether international law supports it. Do we have the coalition to make it work? And those are considerations that we have to take into account.
Now, you don't believe we've seen enough?
Well, this latest event is something that we've got to take a look at.
I think when a politician says, as he said, we got to take a look at that, that's a sure sign. What he really means is, I have no intention of doing anything.
And how does that translate, do you think, Charles, in the Middle East?
Well, it tells people that you do what you need to do. What America says has no importance. What Russia says is important. Will they supply you with arms? Will they protect you at the UN by not allowing a resolution that would hold you back? Is Iran with you because the Iranians will bring in huge numbers of weapons and even revolutionary guards? Is Hezbollah on your side? That matters. It's really helped the Assad regime. They were able to reclaim a very important strategic outpost as a result of Hezbollah on the ground carrying guns and entering into the fight and tipping the balance. So that matters. What America says doesn't. And I think it is absolutely true. Obama has no intention of intervening. And the idea he came up with today, the one you showed about international law, is really absurd. I mean, the idea that we ought to have a moral guide should be the Security Council and the blessing of the butchers of Tiananmen Square, the Chinese, and a dictator in Putin, the Russians, who bit off a chunk of Georgia a couple of years ago, sending in his army, that these are the moral arbiters of what ought to be done in the world, is really quite unbelievable.
Because there wasn't any international law caveat in his red line statement.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was, in the red line, he tried to say America will make a decision on the basis of a moral principle that overrides all of this. Clearly, when the bluff is called, he has no intention of doing this. So now the principle, you don't gas people to death, disappears. He erases the red line, and he hides behind international law.
Stepping back and looking at the very big picture of what's gone on in Syria the last couple of years, we had a huge opportunity in the U.S. national interest to remove a very serious enemy of this country, the Assad regime, one that was allied with Iran. The people were rising up against that and were threatening to take it off the board. And President Obama did not see that opportunity. And I think, beyond all the humanitarian consequences, I think history is going to judge that rather harshly.
And it was in a repetition of what he did during the Green Revolution in Iran, where there was another opportunity, sort of a gift from heaven, of an uprising against the key opponent of all of America's goals, interests, and values in the Middle East. And he did nothing. In fact, he sort of tacitly, passively supported the regime against demonstrators. And you're right, he had a second opportunity with Syria, which would have undone the Iranian coalition stretching all the way from Iran all the way to Lebanon, and he passed it up. I think history will judge this.
To be fair, we don't know the extent of what we're doing. We know what they're publicly talking about, but we don't know all the extent of what we're doing in Syria. We do know that when the red line was crossed earlier this year, and the administration accepted the fact that chemical weapons had been used, he said the calculus has changed. I'm now going to send small arms, and all the reports that we have is that no small arms have arrived. It's almost half a year now. This is a Fox News alert. You're looking live in San Diego. The San Diego City Council voted 7-0 on the terms of the settlement with Mayor Bob Filner. Filner has resigned effective August 30th, and the City Council accepted his resignation.
I'm concerned about the date of the resignation. By my calculations, that means he's in office for another week, and the penalty is already set. That means he can grope with impunity for 7 more days. The women of San Diego had to better stay indoors until the 30th.
Lock up your dogs.
San Diego Mayor Bob Filner apologizes to accusers but denies harassing them.
Depends what you mean by harassment, to use a Clintonian. Look, it's a sad case, actually. He is a sad guy. He did a lot of bad stuff, and if this is a way to get him out, it's worth the money, I suppose. I'm not sure how much of an effect it'll have. There's a pattern in journalism where if you see a Republican that caught with his trousers at his knees, you see the word Republican in the first line of the piece. And then there's a parlor game that conservatives to play. If it's a Democrat, how deep in the piece is it before the person's identified as a Democrat?
I want to go one last quick round on 88-year-old Delbert Belton, who was beaten to death, World War II veteran in Spokane, Washington.
Pat Moynihan is a great Democratic senator and sociologist. One said that the single most important role of a society and of a family is to socialize young men of any race. It wasn't a question of race. Young men, because if you don't socialize them and civilize them, you've got a problem that you cannot eradicate and you can't control. And this is a failure of that happening in this instance and a lot of other instances.
This has been a Sunfish production.